Hey everyone, let's jump right in. Today, we've got a brand new explainer, and we are taking a deep, completely objective dive into the wonderfully messy, frustrating, and downright complex world of modern dating. We're looking at a massive cultural gridlock between young men and young women. Both sides are feeling totally isolated, fingers are being pointed everywhere, and everyone feels misunderstood. So why does this matter to you? Well, because it's literally changing the very fabric of how humans connect. Now, we are absolutely not taking sides here. We're strictly looking at the source material to try and figure out how on earth we arrived at this giant societal stalemate.
Okay, let's dive right into this. I came across this single, stark quote in our sources, and it just perfectly captures the core friction we're unpacking today. The quote says, "We'd rather download an app to say hi than saying hi in person to someone 10 feet away." I mean, wow, right? It turns out we have basically bypassed physical, organic, human connection entirely in favor of digital safety. You've got two people literally 10 feet apart, completely ignoring each other in real life, only to potentially swipe on each other later on their phones. So, what exactly is causing this total breakdown in face to face initiation? To really wrap our heads around that, we had to look at the data. And honestly, the numbers are pretty staggering. We're talking about an estimated 45 to 50% of men aged 18 to 25 who report being actively scared to approach women nowadays. Nearly half of the entire young male population is completely paralyzed by the idea of initiating. The sources highlight that years of societal messaging telling men to just leave women alone have actually worked, maybe almost too well, leading to this massive retreat from organic approaches. Now flip the coin, and the direct counterpart to that male hesitation is honestly just as alarming. Reports are predicting that 50% of women, aged 25 to 45, are going to be single by the year 2030. The sources describe this as a looming female loneliness epidemic. Young women are expressing some really deep frustration that men simply aren't coming up to them anymore. They feel like, they're doing everything right, they're getting dressed up, they're going out, they're dropping hints, but the men just will not initiate. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact disconnect we're dealing with. It's like two completely different realities. On one hand, young women actively want that organic, classic rom-com style approach. They're waiting for a kind, respectful guy to just walk up and initiate. But on the exact opposite end, young men view approaching a woman as walking into an absolute minefield. They're terrified of being secretly recorded and labeled the TikTok creep of the day. So what one side views as this beautiful, romantic ideal, the other side is viewing as a massive social liability. Section 1. The Gym, a microcosm of the stalemate. All right, walk through this incredibly familiar scenario with me. Picture this. Two people share the same gym. They go at the exact same hours, they have the exact same routine. According to the sources, they might even make eye contact, like 10 different times. The woman believes she is dropping crystal clear hints. The man definitely sees the hints. But what happens? Step 3 is a total failure to initiate a conversation. Mutual presence and supposed signals completely fail to translate into actual human connection. So why does that failure happen? Well, the sources give us this quote, which answers it perfectly. Nobody's risking their gym membership over signals just to end up as the TikTok creep of the day. From the male perspective, the consequences of misreading a subtle signal just wildly outweigh any potential reward. They argue, look, women aren't mind readers, and vague hints just aren't enough to justify the risk. If a guy misinterprets a glance, he doesn't just get a polite no anymore. He fears public shaming, being branded a creep online, and literally having his gym membership revoked. Which brings us to a really highly debated concept from the sources, the creepy threshold. It's a fascinating argument. Men argue that the line between romantic and creepy is totally invisible and entirely subjective. Basically, the idea is that if a woman finds a man physically attractive, his approach is totally welcome. But if she doesn't find him attractive, that exact same approach is deemed creepy or uncomfortable. Because guys have no way of knowing which category they fall into before they walk up, they view initiating as a completely blind and dangerous gamble. Let's move to Section 2 and see how this builds the intimidating woman debate. What's really fascinating here is the stark contrast and how both sides view the exact same situation. The female perspective strongly argues that men are simply terrified of women who are pretty, strong, and successful. They say men are intimidated. But the male perspective aggressively pushes back on that. They claim absolutely no man is actually scared of success. Rather, they argue the word intimidating is just a cope used by people who actually just have insufferable attitudes. This leads us to the alleged starter pack of this independent era as described in the sources. You've got an intense focus on careers, but this creates a lot of friction.
Women feel they simply have high standards, while men accuse them of having inflated egos. And the sources point out the rather grim outcomes of the standoff for both sides: lonely nights, empty beds, and as one source very bluntly predicted, eventually just a whole lot of cats.
Moving right along to Section 3, the death of yearning. So women in the sources are actively asking, why aren't men yearning anymore? They deeply miss the effort of the 90s and 2000s, the boom boxes outside the window, making mixed CDs, the unapologetic expression of love. They view that as top-tier flirting. But men point out that society has completely flipped the script on them. Today, if a guy shows that much emotion, he's instantly hit with the negative generational label of being a simp. Men feel like they're being brutally punished for the exact behavior women claim they want. So the crucial point is, why did that romantic effort vanish? Well, to quote the sources again, when 1 out of 4 steps are landmines, you stop trying to cross the minefield. That summarizes the male retreat perfectly. It isn't necessarily out of a lack of desire. It's driven by sheer exhaustion. When every single approach risks public humiliation, being labeled a creep, or being mocked as a simp, the dating landscape literally feels like a minefield, and human nature dictates that eventually you're just going to stop trying to cross it. But the female perspective offers a very different approach to this, framed in the sources as some harsh sister advice. They propose something called rejection therapy. The argument here is basically, yes, girls can be mean, but what is literally the worst that can happen? A dirty look? A polite no? The advice challenges guys to stop hiding under their beds, face their fears head on, and purposefully approach women who are way out of their league. The goal? Just to get used to the sting of rejection and get out of their own heads.
Which brings us to Section 4, the final stalemate, the low-stakes compromise. Because of all this mutual frustration, the actual mechanics of just going on a date have fundamentally changed. Women in the sources express deep confusion over why even the absolute lowest stakes dates are being totally ignored. They are trying to adapt by putting the ball in the man's court, basically begging for simple walking dates, grabbing a quick coffee, or maybe playing mini golf. The entire goal is just to test real, in-person compatibility without making it a huge, expensive deal. Yet, even these super low-stakes compromises are often just met with silence. Which ultimately leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question pulled straight from our sources. Are we just not going on dates anymore? Think about it. With men paralyzed by the fear of being labeled a creep and women completely exhausted by the lack of effort, we have reached a true, undeniable stalemate. It's a fascinating, chaotic reality. We've laid out the perspectives from the source material, but now it's totally up to you to ponder the future of human connection. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the world around you.